Welcome to the Climate and Me food show on climate change. I'm Zena and I'm part of Climate Action Leicester and Leicestershire. And food has been a hobby of mine for a long time around the ethics of food and particularly around the carbon footprints of food. And let me pass over to Hafsa. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone. So I am Hafsa. I've got a horticulture background. So I'm all about growing and then using that in my food. And yeah, I'm also a member of Climate Action Leicester, but also Green Guardians Leicester. That's a Muslim environmental group that's just been started. I'll pass over to Sana.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to both of you, Hafsa and Zena, for having me over. My name is Sana. I'm currently studying Sustainability Development Management, and I'm here because I would love to talk to you about food waste today.
Brilliant. So we thought we would start by sharing a video that was made by a friend. And we're going to, in this series of food shows, we're going to use various videos by people talking about things that relate to climate change in relation to food. So Hafsa is going to do a screen share and play this little mini video for you of Marcus cooking red lentil soup.
Yes, I'll just share that now.
Hi, my name's Marcus and I'm going to show you how to make red lentil and tomato soup. The ingredients we need are tomatoes from a tin, and also, but they're good because in summer you can grow them in your own garden. So that reduces global warming. And this one, and lentils, red lentils also produce less global warming because it imports from a ship, not aeroplane. The other ingredients we need is a cup of water mixed with tomatoes and some onions, basil, and salt and oil and garlic. First, you have to add some oil into a pan and then you light it up. So, you add the onions to the oil and the garlic, all of them, and then here's what I made earlier. The next thing you have to do is get these red lentils, which have been soaking in water for a while, and tip it in. All in. Then you get first stir it. Tomatoes and stir it again. Then all you have to do is add about a tablespoonful of basil and about half a teaspoon of salt. Then leave it to simmer for 45 minutes. Once it's simmered, then you should blend it with a blender so it's nice and smooth. This is one that I made earlier with my mum. Smells nice. And that's all for today for the red lentil and tomato soup. Bye.
I loved his yum.
That was beautiful.
It's nice to see a kid really enjoying red lentils. I certainly find a lot of the children I know are not willing to eat pulses. And I think cooking from scratch, learning to cook, like being in a family that cook, which he is, he's in a family where they cook from scratch a lot, makes you much more likely to actually end up able to eat things like pulses. And that's has a much lower carbon footprint than the high kind of meat levels. So I feel like that's one of the really big pluses of growing up cooking. You might end up actually eating lower carbon foods just by default because you become used to them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I grew up with learning how to cook and then also growing food like from scratch a lot. So yeah, I've remembered, and it's been at the back of my mind, like appreciating exactly like all these different elements they have in your food. And then as I learned more about the climate, thinking about what carbon footprint does each of these foods have. So it's definitely really important that when you're younger, if you learn how to cook then, or just get involved somehow with how your food's made and gets to you, you'll definitely appreciate it a lot better as you grow up. And it makes it easier for you to make those changes as well, when you learn more about the climate, which is really important, I think.
Yeah, because you know how to like tweak what's in your food. You can say, oh well, so tin tomatoes aren't such a good thing because they have a higher carbon footprint, but I could use tomatoes I've just grown in the garden and I've just harvested from the garden. I've got too many tomatoes today. I know what I'll make red lentil and tomato soup.
Yeah, I think the most beautiful thing about this video is him knowing the impact of each of the ingredients that he's using. That was very nice.
And I love the fact that he actually recognized that if a food is shipped in a dry form, even if it's shipped a very long way, it has a much lower carbon footprint than something that's flown or driven, even if it's driven like a shorter distance, because shipping has a lower carbon footprint. So if it's not perishable, if it's dried and it's not wet, then it's going to be lighter and it can be shipped. And he knows that. It's like, hooray.
That was really nice. No, I really enjoyed the video, and it was basic ingredients and he made a delicious soup. It looked really good.
And he likes it.
Yes.
When he learned that recipe, he went home and he insisted on making it twice in the next week for the family.
No, that was absolutely nice. I really enjoyed it.
I think that the great thing about cooking your own food is that you can tweak what's in the recipe. That's what you were saying a second ago, Hafsa. It's like that you can make sure that it's more local ingredients or more dried ingredients. You can make sure it's shipped and not flown. You could make sure that it's not grown in a heated greenhouse. I think there's this great myth at the moment, if you buy English tomatoes and cucumbers at this time of year, they have a lower carbon footprint than tomatoes and cucumbers from Spain. And that's just not true, because they've been grown in a heated greenhouse. Your heated greenhouse is pumping carbon dioxide out into the atmosphere in order to be heated, whereas what's grown in Spain and then brought here has a much lower carbon footprint. You can make those choices so much more easily when you're controlling the ingredients that go into the food because you're cooking it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that links a lot to eating seasonal food as well. Then, like, rather than having tomatoes this time of year, when in the UK they'd only be able to grow in under glass houses in heat, not avoiding them at this time of year and eating seasonal veg, and
like kohlrabi.
Yeah, something like that.
Or kale or cauliflower or leeks. You
Reliable
can make a salad out of leeks.
Yeah, there is so much, isn't there? And I think it's a shame that our palates and our like I was saying, that even our culture, like being Indian, a lot of our food is based on a lot of these veg which aren't exactly seasonal, but we still have them every single year. I mean, sorry, all throughout the year. Things like tomatoes is like a base of all of our dishes. So changing that culture to be better on the climate, I think that's a really good learning process. I'm hoping to implement myself. So by buying seasonally or buying from a local farm who grows seasonal food and getting like getting like a box delivered, that's something I really want to implement and like learn on. Because yeah, it'd be great if we all grew seasonally, we'd be able to, and we have space to grow ourselves, grow that in our gardens, and then bring it straight to the kitchen. So reducing that carbon footprint of production and transportation and all sorts would be really, yeah.
And I think you have a very different relationship to a vegetable that you can only eat for a few months of the year. Like, I don't eat leeks in the summer because although they are now available in the summer, I think of them as a winter vegetable, but I love them in the winter. They're my favorite vegetable. I only eat courgettes in the summer because they only are available locally in the summer. But when they're here, I completely adore them. My daughter and I went out to the allotment yesterday to look at whether the first asparagus shoots were coming through, but she was very disappointed they're only this tall now. But you know, next week, the first asparagus will be ready to eat. We can only eat it for a month, but for that month, we're going to enjoy every mouthful.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're so much more closer to nature as well, then, aren't you? Like, you're in tune with what's happening, and there's so many benefits to that. That is so, like, eating seasonally has tons of benefits when you really think about it. And yeah.
Sana, you were saying that you'd found that over lockdown your buying of seasonal had changed.
Yes, so I highly encourage buying local and seasonal. So my diet is plant-based mainly. I bought more fruits and vegetables from the market, so it was fresh from the farmers and I could bring it home, and that way I also avoided food waste because I only cooked what I needed and I avoided throwing it away, and that was really important. So yeah, I always buy local and seasonal products.
And why did lockdown increase that pattern?
Because before I didn't have the time and I didn't really focus on my diet, and I used to buy things ready-made or anything that was convenient and made quickly. But when lockdown started and I was at home, I thought, no, I need to change my diet for my health and for the planet, of course, to avoid, polluting the planet more with greenhouse gases and polluting the planet more. So I decided to just control my diet, and I went to the market one day and I saw all these fresh fruits and vegetables, and I'm like, it's not far from home. I could actually do it. And I enjoyed cooking. I really enjoyed cooking with different fruits and different vegetables, and it was really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely noticed what you're saying there is that you kind of shifted away from shopping in supermarkets and more towards shopping at the market.
Yes.
And I'm very aware that supermarkets really encourage food waste.
Yes, and buying from supermarkets, most of the things are packed in plastic, and I don't want that kind of pollution. Or you have to, if I needed, let's say, 1 lemon, I can only buy a pack of 6 lemons. I don't need 6 lemons. I just need 1 lemon. Whereas if I went to the market, I can get my 1 lemon only, if you know what I mean. I'm not forced to buy more than what I need.
Yeah, and on the market, you can take your own packaging and just say to them, I don't want a bag, here's my bag. They look at you slightly strangely, but they get used to you. I mean,
Yes.
like the stalls I go to on the market, they know me.
No, absolutely. And also price-wise, I think that supermarket prices are a lot more higher. Whereas if you went directly to a farmer's market, it would be cheaper. And again, you only buy what you need. So we stop overbuying and we stop wasting it, because I think it's really important to understand that when we throw away leftovers or any kind of food that's expired or wilted, where is it going? It's going to landfills where it's emitting methane gas and it's polluting the planet. And that's why we have climate crisis. So it's really important that we understand that we need to buy seasonal and local products to protect our planet.
And I always feel really distressed about the idea that because we're buying too much food, because the supermarkets are presenting it as, oh, well, you can get 3 times as much, buy 3 for 1, and you maybe only wanted 1, but here's this offer, so you bring 3 home and then you end up throwing 1 away, and maybe you forced yourself to eat 1 that you didn't want to. And the idea that we would end up throwing food away and causing climate change, and that exact climate change is impacting on people in other countries who are already struggling for food and making it harder for them to get food, that the fact that I'm buying too much food and wasting that food is causing it to be harder for people to have enough food. I find that a very uncomfortable link that I'm quite conscious of. So yeah, throwing food away is a...
No, definitely. I mean, I come from a country called Burundi in East Africa, and the water level of the lake has risen, and therefore all the land that was supposed to, you know, that was meant for farming is destroyed. And of course, in the UK, we don't realize this, but we do waste here. And I think if we actually looked what's happening around the world in different places, people are affected by it. And it's time that we realize that and avoid wasting.
Yeah.
I think the climate and its effect, it's really sad to hear about the water levels rising and that reducing the opportunity for farmers to grow. And there's so many stories like that all across the globe because of a lot of, it's really sad, but when you look at how carbon travels in the air, a lot of the Western countries like America, England, their carbon dioxide, which they develop, naturally travels down into the southern hemisphere, and it's really severely impacts all these countries. And you hear so many stories of like drought and things like water levels and pests, which are all increasing because of climate change and because of increasing heat levels or really random weather patterns. It's a huge impact on food, on local food farmers, but just on people's livelihoods and lives in general. And it's really sad to think about.
And it's like, historically, the rich eat more meat and more dairy, and the poor eat more plant-based foods and more lentils. And that's always historically been the case, and it's still the case. And here we are in the West eating this very meat, dairy heavy diet. And it's historically, that means we've released loads of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and they hang around for hundreds of years, causing climate change, impacting on people who historically haven't and still aren't. So yeah. I think Marcus's video brought something else up for me as well, which was that sense of, here is someone who, when he is 15, when he is 25, will be sufficiently comfortable with cooking that he will make his friends and he will build his relationships over food. He will say to people, come round and I'll cook you a meal. And that'll teach them the kinds of foods they could eat that they might not try if they went out to a restaurant, because it'll just be natural for him to cook low carbon foods. But it'll also, I know this was true for me, I guess maybe I'm just projecting it onto him, but it was definitely true, is still definitely true for me, that I do make my friends over food. There were a couple of years when I lived in a housing situation where I couldn't invite people round to my house to cook for them. And I didn't make any friends in that year. And actually this year of lockdown, I haven't made any new friends, because for me, in order to make a friendship, I need to spend time one-to-one with somebody in an environment that is not public. And the natural way to do that is to say, come round for a meal, talk to me while I cook, let's sit around and eat. And that's what builds my relationships. Food is just like, it is at the heart of my relationships, but it's also at the heart of my conversations with people. Like, I'm much more likely to manage to have a conversation about something that really matters to me, like climate change, in a way that doesn't alienate the person I'm having the conversation with, if I'm actually in a much more natural environment, like sharing a meal. Do you find that?
For me, yes. I think because I've got a plant-based diet and my friends and family are all meat eaters, so they find my food, well, they used to think that my food was bland and boring, but then when I started making food, I couldn't invite people at home because of COVID, but I would just drop it at my friend's place or family members. And they were like, oh, I couldn't say that this was vegan. And I'm like, yeah, there is nothing wrong with it. I mean, you know, it's edible, it's good. And it's just changing that idea of saying that, you know, local and seasonal fruits and vegetables you can make a good meal out of it and it has a low carbon footprint. And yes, definitely. And there's also this sense of community, you're spreading something good around.
Yeah, you're sharing your message through food, aren't you? And
yes.
And yeah, I completely agree with you, Zina, that when you are sitting down rather than on a screen, especially right now when you're having conversations, all of them's across screens. But when you sit down with someone at a table, you're having food, you're far more comfortable. And yeah, you come across, you can much better have a discourse which isn't which you might not agree on, but it's the conversation is so much better, isn't it? And yeah, I think even for me, just about conversations and food, growing up, every time you call someone over, it's always around food. It's always like, yes, we're gonna have some tea and some you always bring out the food when you have someone over. So yeah, it's really important in that aspect as well, I think. I think I was thinking about just going back to having things which are shipped in, and going back to like how supermarkets encourage you to buy more than you need and are encouraging waste. I was definitely thinking about the stores that you get where you can buy things in bags, things like lentils and stuff, which you could go in and buy, and they're not exactly accessible, and they're not really great for everyone to access, but that could be an option for people who perhaps only live by themselves and can go to one of those stores where they just have bags of things, and you just take how much you need without increasing your packaging and plastic.
They used to be called pick and mix shops when I was a kid.
Oh, is that what you call them?
That's what they used to be called. I don't think they are anymore. The one in Leicester is called a zero waste shop, isn't it? You take your own packaging in and then you weigh out the amount of whatever it is that you want.
Yeah. I think more of those which are more accessible. I think it's definitely tricky to get that accessible thing. But Zena, you were mentioning earlier about how with your local community and local friends, you'd get large quantities of these bags and share them.
It came out of a local footpaths group, a carbon reduction group, that the people on my street decided we should bulk buy food together. So what we started doing was like 4 times a year, we'll put together a bulk order, and everyone will say, okay, well, I want 10 kilos of chickpeas, and I want 5 kilos of chickpeas, or I want 2 kilos of chickpeas. And if we buy them in bulk, they tend to come in 25 kilo sacks. So we'll get, when we've reached the point that there's 25 kilos of it, but also of all the other things we buy, so rice and split peas and flour and nuts and dried fruit and all organic, then it just gets delivered to my house, and people bring around their scales and their containers. They walk around or they cycle round. There was someone who was living in Clarendon Park who used to cycle over on his bike and then cycle home carrying the most enormous load of food. It was like, I was always staggered by how much food he felt he could carry on his bike. But it's nice because it gives you that kind of, you get to talk to people while you're weighing out the food, and the food is much, much fresher, and it's much, much cheaper. Like, it was organic, but it cost much less than non-organic food from a supermarket because you were weighing it out yourself.
Yeah.
And when you buy it in fresh, good quality food, it keeps longer, and it's still much nicer than what you buy in a supermarket. Like, I would never buy nuts from a supermarket. They just don't taste good. They aren't fresh at the point at which you buy them. But if you buy fresh nuts in a box that's just come from Peru or Brazil or India, and it's like it's been shipped and it hasn't stayed in England for very long, and now and then my cashews will keep for a year, and they're still way better than what you would buy from a supermarket, even if you opened them the day after buying them from a supermarket. So I enjoyed that scheme. Again, it's not running at the moment because of COVID, but I hope we'll go back to doing that. And it's a nice way of making friends and encouraging people to do things.
I love this concept so much. I've never heard of it before, but I really love it. And again, I would definitely buy from someone who's organizing it. So whenever you're back, please let me know. I would love to be part of it.
Yeah, definitely. But also you could set it up for your area, because the Whole Foods, the Leicester Whole Foods, who I buy from, they give us a 10% discount for buying in bulk, and they deliver it.
Oh, wow.
So it's like you just get it, and then you can get people to do it. It's not a difficult organizational job, but yeah, join the group, watch how I do it, and then you can do it. Let's have one on every street.
Yeah, I really love that, and And like you said, it stores a lot better, and you can control how much it's all dried stuff. So yeah, it'll store a lot better, but you're at the same time, you're having more control about what you're bringing into your home, knowing with certainty that it's gonna last you, isn't it?
And also we got to have conversations around the ethics of the footprint of the food. It's like people would say, oh, well, you know, should we be buying the white British sugar, or should we be buying the organic fair trade cane sugar? And it's like, well, no, the carbon footprint of organic fair trade cane sugar is much lower than the carbon footprint of white British sugar, even though it's been shipped in. And it's like, clearly we should be buying anyway the organic cane sugar because of its fair trade. And it's just like, you were able to have those conversations in an environment which is just very different.
Yeah.
But it's all about education also, Sina, because, you know, when people see grown organically in the UK, they'll probably go for it immediately, thinking, oh, it's made in the UK. Whereas if there's the same product grown somewhere in Spain, they'll be like, oh, it's not grown in the UK, and not knowing the impact, the planet impact on both of the products. So I think it's all about education and people researching and making sure that what they buy is actually good for the planet.
Yeah, I think one of the later shows in this series, we should focus on the kind of the details of the carbon footprints of different foods so that you can make a reasonable guess, because actually you can make a reasonable guess about the carbon footprint of a food when you look at it. It doesn't take that much knowledge. It just needs you to take a kind of systematic approach.
Yeah.
Did you both learn how to cook as children then?
I did, yes, but I was always focused my studies that it wasn't my favorite thing to do. And then it started when I became a student and I was studying, and of course it became a critical skill to learn how to cook. So yeah, I practiced making soups and basic things like rice and pasta, and then it just grew from there, and now I can cook properly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, for me, I think my parents are both, my dad especially, he's a big foodie, and he's always up for experimenting and trying new recipes. So it's something I've always grown up with something happening in the kitchen, and being coerced into being involved in some way. I probably didn't want to be involved when I was younger, but yeah, coerced into it. And I have grown to love it, and I really enjoy like trying new things and experimenting with recipes, which is why I'm really keen on starting to eat more seasonally, so I can experiment with my recipes and change some Indian dishes with some seasonal alternatives, and kind of hope that people catch on to that and do the same.
Cool. Maybe when lockdown ends, I could come around and you can feed me some of your new experimental food. That sounds really exciting.
Definitely, yeah, totally. Yeah. How about you, Zena? Did you learn when you were young?
Yeah, I grew up with my in an extended family with my parents and my father's parents, and my mum grew a really large proportion of our food. So we ate mostly from the garden, plus dried foods. We didn't really buy much that wasn't dried. Like all the fruit and veg pretty much was from our garden and seasonal. So it was like, we would say, what should we have for supper tonight? And then we would go out and dig it up from the garden and pick it from the garden. And that was how it happened. So you did tend to eat particular things at particular times of year. But it definitely gave me that sense of food being just something that's very day to day. And yes, I learned how to cook. And my grandmother always made the leftovers from the night before into the soup for the lunch the next day. We always had soup the next day. And I think she had this amazing skill, which I don't possess, of making the soup just kept going. It's not like she stopped and started on the soup. She just added the leftovers, and yet it carried on tasting good, which is a real skill. And then, yeah, when we'd used it all up, then she would start again. But so yeah, I don't think very much food got wasted in our house when I was a kid. And we had a compost heap, of course.
Yeah.
I like how your grandmother was creative with the leftovers.
And my grandmother was vegetarian. Like she came from a white middle-class meat-eating family, but for some reason, she was vegetarian throughout my life. I think she had been vegetarian for most of her life. I think she had just made a decision herself. my mum basically had to teach my grandfather, look, we can't begin to afford to eat meat at every meal. We're going to eat meat twice a week, absolute maximum. The rest of the time we're not. Meat is a treat food in our house. And I think that's how I grew up, that because we cooked our own food and we regard meat as a treat food, I think a good way to reduce your carbon footprint, if you regard the thing that has a high footprint as something that you can eat, you just look forward to it and you eat it occasionally.
I really like that. I love that thinking. I think, yeah, in my house, meat was a huge problem. We just had way too much of it, and we still have weeks where I'm like, okay, we've just had like 4 meals of meat this week. So I love the idea of implementing, like treating it as a treat. Right now, we create like a weekly menu, so we make sure that at least there's 4 days of non-meat dishes, and so slowly I want to whittle that down to maybe 1 or 2, but yeah, treating it treating, or just anything really that has a high carbon footprint as a treat ingredient, that's a really nice way of thinking about it.
I think we might be running out of time. Sana, did you have anything else you wanted to say to wind up with?
For me, just about, avoiding food waste. And when in any household you're throwing away food, just think first where it's going to go and the impact that it'll have on climate. Try to reuse your leftovers or anything that you have. If it's fruits or vegetables, if you think they're going to get wilted, just freeze them to avoid food waste. Or any other thing, you can share them on apps like Olio or Too Good To Go, so you're sharing them with other people who would actually eat it rather than goes to waste.
Or get to know your neighbors, give them to your neighbors. I have a setup with that with my neighbors, that I when I make baked bread, that's what I do, I bake my own bread. I can't eat 2 loaves, so I have a neighbor I give a loaf to.
That's amazing.
I was your neighbor, Zena.
I've been lucky with my neighbors, but partly it's because I'm the kind of person who knocks on the door and I say, I've got too many courgettes, can I fob some off on you? And I think my neighbors will see me as the mad courgette woman, but it does build a relationship.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Hafsa, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I think growing your own is definitely a great way to reduce your carbon footprint. Even if you start small, if you're not confident with it, just try, and you'll be surprised at how it's quite straightforward when once you get the knack of it. And yeah, things like composting to reduce your waste. But yeah, try growing your own. I definitely recommend that.
So thank you so much for doing this, and we will have more shows coming up. Goodbye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.